Welcome to the Docs Who Lift podcast, where we distill and simplify the complexities of a healthy lifestyle, exercise, medicine, and weight loss. We're excited to bring you a podcast that's a prescription for clinical practice, scientific recommendations, and just real life. This is the Docs Who Lift podcast.
Welcome back to the Docs Who Lift podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. I got my co-host, Dr. Karl Nadolsky Jr., and we got a special guest here. Mr. Is a doctor yet? Doctor yet?
No,
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Dontae Burks.
Dontae Burks.
Welcome to the show. Today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite things, which is lifting weights, but exercising in general in children, which is something we've been passionate about. My brother and I have a YouTube video out there. We talked about it before of us working out when we were young. My brother had abs in utero. And then you can see he's pretty jacked as like a fifth grader or something like that. I don't remember how old he is, but
yeah. And that kind of comes around to why Dontae is someone I wanted to have on this podcast. So, just a quick little nugget about Dontae. And then I want him to tell his story, but so you went on to, so you played football, went to high school in our neck of the woods, Whitehall High School, and they're really good in the Muskegon area. Yep. Went on to play football at Wayne State, which is a D2 school, and then you ended up, but you transferred to Alma and graduated from there?
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And then he graduated with an exercise physiology degree. He's certified through the NASM, even has CrossFit Level 1 certification, and does a lot of coaching for football. He's working with Central Michigan football and one of the local high schools up there. And I met him because we recently had a whole new change in our high school's football coaching program. Our new high school football coach was he a grad assistant, Spencer, when you were in high school? Right after I graduated, Coach Pat Collins was around.
He was our safety coach. He was our DB coach. Yeah.
And so, we should probably get him on the podcast sometime and have some fun, but he's an awesome guy, brings great positivity to our area. You know, the kids are excited. And this past summer, we don't have to get into the weeds of the geography and logistics of what happened, Dontae, but the plan was to have Dontae come on and be one of our coaches and also help out with our strength program. And when you get to see a picture of him, you'll know why. Is a freaking stud. And so I was all excited, of course, because I'm just, I love that stuff. And obviously I have a 10-year-old son who's into wrestling and football and stuff. And so I just happened to, it was during our football camp, right? When I saw you, I was like, that's got to be that guy. And I went over and we walked back to the weight room and he was doing a great job of helping some of the high school kids lift weights. And I was just up there doing a little bit. And then what happened was they had like a few weeks of like a kids strength training camp, essentially. Mm-hmm. So of course my 10-year-old son, who's already a little bit of a little meathead, got to go and do it. And then they asked you to do, was it just 1 week or something? Just out of
Yep. It was that week that I had yours.
It was kind of when you were transitioning out. Yeah.
Yep.
And so Spencer knows Trey, my 10-year-old, and he's a smart kid. Likes to work out with everybody other than me to some degree, but he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's like young Sheldon on the show. He will give it to anybody straight. And so if he is excited and happy about something, he'll let you know. And if it's not, if he's not, whatever, he doesn't say anything. But if something's wrong, he'll let you know too. He doesn't care. Mm-hmm. And when after he got done working out with you, he was all excited. And I think I told you that. He was like, "Oh my God! First of all, I don't know many guys that have bigger muscles than you, but Coach Dontae does." And I was like, "Well, what the hell, man?" And then he's like, he's awesome. I mean, he was just so pumped up. And so he doesn't realize this exactly yet. Someday I'll tell him, but like, I really trust his impression because it's always good.
It's genuine. Yeah.
Because it's so genuine. And so I was like, I was so happy. And then of course I was so disappointed that you had to go, and this just had to do with geographical logistics. Sometimes things don't work out, but then we grew up lifting weights, and I was a little guy like Trey, and but I was all into lifting weights with my dad. Spencer kind of followed along after us. Of course, he ended up being tall. I'm short, so naturally throughout my whole life, people are like, "Oh, lifting weights made you short." I'm like, "No, I was short anyways. Whatever." Oh my God! So there've been all these myths. But as the docs who lift and we deal with all these, really diseases that could be at least somewhat mitigated if people would work out when they're little kids all the way through life, we absolutely are advocates of it. And there just happened to be some publications recently that I told you about before that we started. Just recently, the thing that got me excited was the British Journal of Sports Medicine. They published this thing on an infographic on the mythology of youth resistance training. The myth that it stunts your bone growth. There's no data to support that it's only for athletes. Obviously, we're going to talk about sports and stuff, but it's not just for athletes. In fact, that's why we push it, right?
Yep.
And, talking about waiting till you're 12 years old, that has nothing to do with anything. Anybody can think of that. That girls get bulky. Oh, my God, that doesn't happen, right? And that it's unsafe for youth. So those are all myths. We want everyone to work out. And we just wanted to learn a little bit more about your experience and how you go about it, because you obviously do a great job with the little kids, but you also take care of the adolescents playing football, other sports, and college athletes, the whole spectrum from little bitty kids to adolescents. So just, tell us a little bit about your story, man.
How young? Yeah, like how young are the kids that you're working with and whatever?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, my backstory was I actually was not into lifting growing up. I was very pudgy, overweight. My family, we just ate, and what got me into lifting actually was my cousins. So they were more into they wanted to be fit. So they were like, but we didn't have the resources. So we created makeshift benches out of our couch, some broomsticks, different, whatever we could find to lift, we lifted. Cinder blocks. And I dreaded it. I hated it. I'm like, bro, this is dumb. Like, we should be playing basketball. But it kind of started to spark the interest because I hated getting beat up by them. I said, so obviously something is working for them. So, but it really still didn't take off or really interest me until probably junior high. I had a gym teacher who told me, if you want to be great, you got to lift weights. I said, you know what? I'll try it. So, began lifting weights, and I think it was going into freshman year of high school. I stayed in the house. I did push-ups, sit-ups. I watched a Herschel Walker, I think it was, documentary.
Oh, man, my dad would love. We used to talk about that, the Herschel Walker workout. Yes. Remember, Spence?
Yeah, of course.
And tried to just do that to a T. I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, drank milk. I really just was like, I'm going to be physically fit now. And so when I left from 8th grade, going to 9th grade, I was 185 pounds, but I think I was pretty solid.
Wow.
And it was just amazing from there. And then that's kind of when the interest of lifting kind of took off, because now I'm in high school, I'm playing JV, I'm playing varsity. And you just realize, wow, this stuff actually matters. And then obviously having the opportunity to go play in college, I found also that, through injuries and not being able to play as much, I found that I liked it to lift more anyways. So my excitement went from being about football to being about in shape. So I would go to practice, do our team lift, and then go back to the gym at the rec center afterwards. Just crazy stuff. And even during that, I got certified, and it just really started to spark my interest. So then after COVID and everything went down, got into helping out with like the youth. So I've worked with kids as young as 7.
Nice.
And obviously I've also worked with the elderly as well. But right now, I'm working with primarily junior high kids through collegiate athletes. So that's kids that have never seen a weight. And then there's kids that are at the highest level of college football, which is, Division I.
So what's your approach with the young kids? Like, what do you do? So yeah, like someone comes in that's older, you can start showing them all the different things. But what do you do with a kid? Do you just same thing, but just at a lower level, or how do you do it?
So that's one of the biggest myths too, is that you treat children like little adults, but they're not. So a lot of times, depending on the age, the first thing that I try to establish is play, allowing them to have fun, have kind of have an objective, but not really, because a lot of times at that age, up until puberty, really any adaptation is going to be just neural. Just them being more coordinative and just like learning how their body works. So I'm not focused too much on, like I see stuff on Instagram and stuff where they have an 8-year-olds run with these resistance bands and speed, and it's like, that's not necessary right now. The biggest thing is like for me, even at the junior high that I'm at right now, at 5th grade, as young as fifth grade as well as eighth grade. So the fifth graders and below, we focus more on like dodgeball and tag and different things like that, where it may not seem like a training, but it is, because it's encompassing a lot of modalities of movement. So their agility, their sprinting, their ability to react. And that's what I first established with someone that's very young. It's just their ability to just be able to be active and move. So,
well, they're like, but Coach Dontae, we want arms like you.
Yeah, and it's funny because they'll say it and they'll try to, and I tell them, if you want the ability to put on muscle like this, you have to first know how to move the muscles that it requires.
That's
and
great.
If they can't, you know what I'm saying, and if they can't do a chin up, if they can't do some of the simplistic things, then really over time, me teaching them how to do a bicep curl is not going to do much for them.
Yeah.
So
then how do you progress then? Yeah. How do you progress then?
Yeah. So how about like starting, like pull-ups? Of course, going back to when we were little, I mean, we were doing pull-ups and we had a little machine. We had an old universal machine. That's what I started lifting on when I was like 8 years old. And so, it's pretty simple. You start pretty basic, pushing, pull-ups, and, some leg exercises that my dad helped me do. And then ultimately we did free weights. And that's kind of what I've done with Trey to some degree. And yeah, he and we are probably more advanced than most people. But yeah, I mean, how would you kind of take that approach with the little kids who now they got some basic movements and they want to learn the basic resistance training stuff.
So, I mean, even with like the high school that I'm working with now, for example, last year we were 2 and 7 and guys couldn't do 5 pull-ups. They couldn't do 10 push-ups. It was bad. And I'm not going to blame, the school, but it was like the kids just wasn't exposed to that like over time. So the first thing I did was the ones that could do pull-ups, they were able to then do them. But even the ones that couldn't, and now the athletes that I work with in the junior high and younger, the first thing we begin off with is being able to hang. And just hang and be able to hold your body weight up there. Because if you can't hold yourself up there, you can't pull yourself up there.
Right.
And then once they learn how to hang, then we go into more of an active hang. So now we're engaging, different muscles to keep them not just hanging, just, willy-nilly, but actually hanging with some stability to it. And I think for me and for others, we grew up on the monkey bars. And monkey bars are a segue to you being able to do a pull-up or a chin-up. Because you're holding yourself and then you start to integrate the movement with it. So then that way, when you get to junior high and high school, all it is now is just a straight up line. So, but kids nowadays don't do the monkey bars and the jungle gyms and stuff now. So
that's an interesting point, because I'll tell you what, that's something for whatever reason Trey has always been into. And then then now he can, he's 10 years old and he can crank out tons of pull-ups and stuff.
Exactly.
And I've always kind of, I always figured that. I'm like, oh man, he's playing on the monkey bars, but he's really working out. He doesn't even know it. Yeah. So one thing, like I said, we started off like on the universal machine, and I don't even really remember when I really started like free weight type stuff. Things are, and so I'm a big fan, Spencer, I think, and I are big fans of, kids / even the elderly or people who don't really know what they're doing to start with like these real basic machines. I'm all about fundamentals, but I think sports training has evolved. And I told you I was going to maybe make a joke about this. I like to think that you and I are like in the same age range. It turns out that might not be true. Because you just graduated in 2020 and I graduated in 2023 from Michigan State. So, all right. Anyways, but things have evolved, and there's definitely more, I don't know what I would call it, Spencer, like dynamic training now, which seems really good. Like, but it also, it's almost a little out of my area of experience and expertise. So how to develop kids to that, because to me, that does potentially maybe increased risk of injury if you don't really do it right. Like get on a universal machine and doing some bench press. I don't think it's almost impossible to get hurt unless you don't warm up, and try to like max out or something. So what, I don't know, what are your thoughts kind of balancing those two things and how to develop kids that way? I don't know.
I think, for me and from anything I've ever read, and anyone that I've ever learned from, it's the same thing. Whether you're 8 years old or 18 or beyond, if you have improper programming, injury is inevitable. So for me, I'm not going to, and any good coach should not progress a kid to a more dynamic movement, whether it's a hang clean, a snatch, even some plyometric stuff, until they've established fundamental basics. And so like I said, I see stuff all the time where, even like collegiate athletes doing a hang clean or a power clean and the form's terrible. Like they may be able to muscle through it and get it up. Same thing with like a youth athlete, but over time that improper form causes stress on areas that it shouldn't, and that will eventually lead to an injury. So it's just about proper programming. And that's the overarching theme of all of this. If you're training youth, you have to be able to demonstrate the movement properly for them. And then at the same time, have the progressions to get to that point, which is what CrossFit has taught me too, is like CrossFit gets this bad rep of having just poor movement. But in reality, it's bad coaching. It's not bad, it's not bad movement. So having the progressions to certain things, whether it's a squat or it's an overhead squat or it's a pull up, whatever, these things matter, especially in the youth level. So,
yeah, I mean, I just in middle school, I started doing tons and tons of push-ups kind of similarly. And then it wasn't until like later in middle school, early high school, where I got really into the free weights, I think, when I remember. So I think that's a good, what is Trey doing dodgeball now? Should we get him into?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with Trey, I mean, he's kind of at a different level. I mean, Dontae remembers he just can do a lot of stuff, and so what I do with Trey, because he's so strong, is I actually give him relatively heavy sort of free weights. And those are air quotes for most people are listening to this. They can't see us. But I hold on to them because youth, like it's like the stability muscles. And, again, maybe the people who have a PhD in like youth growth are going to think we're not saying the right terms. But he can essentially do dumbbell bench press with really heavy dumbbells, but I'm holding them in place for him. And then, he works with people like you, or he goes to something called ETS. Are you familiar with that in West Michigan?
I've heard of it.
Okay. And, and they don't push them with the weight, but they really push the form, the mechanics, and all that stuff. And so I kind of rely on them. And then and I don't mind spotting him for like a little bit heavy because I know he needs a little bit of some of that stimulus. Like you said, it's neuromuscular. Yep. So like when I was little, I wasn't gaining mass until I went through puberty, which was really like when I was like 16 years old. I was probably we're a little bit late bloomers, but I was pretty darn strong. But that was from like doing machine stuff where you don't even need a spotter necessarily, or my dad would spot us for pull-ups. And so that's kind of what I do. And then let's see what else. I mean, they do body weight stuff. He can. I have all the little kids that are on his like football team do real basic like trap bar deadlifts, so that I can really sort of see their form. And I never got into the cleans and stuff. And I saw you doing it that day with the high school kids. And I don't know if you can remember exactly, but our high school kids probably didn't really know what they were doing. There were some guys who were kind of strong, and you did a great job at, they were using a bar, which is like hardly any weight, and really critiquing their form, which of course is important for especially that type of lifting. It wasn't even just squatting where you can kind of say, okay, nice, good, square, get level, whatever, keep your head up, all that stuff. So there's definitely like this spectrum of machines to the basic resistance training form to then really that dynamic sports stuff. So do you ever use machines to kind of get people started to get strong or not? Or is that kind of... We don't do that. I don't know. Like
no. I mean, definitely. And so in patients, not patients, but in clients, clients that I have that are older, I will definitely use more machine-based activities because it allows them to not have to worry so much about stabilizing. And as you get older, there's a few things that decline very rapidly if they're not used, which is your power and your ability to be stable. So me having a grandma or grandpa do a dumbbell bench press and they haven't worked rotator cuff muscles or chest muscles in decades, I'm setting them up for a tear of some sort. So getting them on a machine where it eliminates some of that ability to have to stabilize definitely helps them. I will use machine work for like higher reps because if you fail on a machine, you're safe, as opposed to me failing on a back squat that I'm just, barbell back squat or a bench press. You fail on those, you're going to get hurt. Yeah. So I use those for clients that are looking for a hypertrophy goal primarily because the only focus now is just getting it done, and they can go to a failure stimulus. Or for people that have not trained in a while, that may not be able to do even their own body weight. Now the machine adds an external stimulus that they can still gain muscle, but in a safe way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's exactly what I
That's
see
pretty
it.
much what that's one of the arguments I'll make during because I'm doing this debate on aerobic versus resistance training for fat loss and obesity management, and one of the issues is like barrier to entry. And it's like these movements are complex. If people have never done a squat or deadlift, and even a bench press, it's kind of like throwing people and just like, all right, go do it. Without a trainer or coach, it's kind of scary. So machines can basically help put them into the plane of motion and make sure that it doesn't fall in their face or they fall over. So I think that's a good practical.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, anybody can do a lightweight machine if they do it and follow directions and do it right. And that's another argument, even for the little kids and the elderly, is that it's lighter than body weight exercises. People get scared of weights because they think it's heavy, but it doesn't have to be heavy. Machine weights, even free weights, can be a lot lighter than body weight, and you got to start somewhere, right? So that's an argument I make all the time. So that's great. I often tell most of my patients, of course, they're not like young people trying to train for sports, and I'm just trying to get them in the weight room, and I describe the Planet Fitness circuit. You know what I mean? All right. You do a pushing, and then you do a pulling, and then the legs, and then we go around. And I'm like, you can get a great worgout that way, and it's good for your health, especially. So that's awesome.
Cool. Any other practical tidbits for I'm going to name this podcast "Cradle to Grave Working Out with Dontae."
Yeah.
But it sounds like you have a lot of experience across the spectrum of patients. But any tidbits as you go from youth to like high school, college, and then weekend warriors in adulthood? It sounds like the principles all kind of remain the same. You start off with movement patterns and then progress from there.
Yeah, and I think that if we're looking at dealing with athletes, like I said, the first step is to play. Like if you want your child or you want to develop a great athlete from a youth level all the way up through college and even to the professional ranks, the one thing that you also want to try to avoid is burnout. And burnout happens when you're exposed to the same stimulus, in my opinion, without any reasoning behind it. So I know I had friends who played basketball, AAU, travel, the whole nine, and not really realizing that and maybe the parents even know this, but like they were doing these every weekend tournaments, this, and not realizing that it was to prep them for college. Now, were they always necessary? No, but it's the same thing that entails with lifting, is that when you start off a child lifting, it has to be fun. It has to be engaging, and it has to still entail the modalities that they'll use eventually down the road. Now, after they hit an age where they started to mature, that's when you can start kind of focusing in more on specific tasks. So like maybe endurance first, or hypertrophy, and then strength, and then power. And power typically is like the last stage, like when you get to like 11th grade and beyond. And maybe some freshmen are ready. It just depends on how you've laid the foundation early on. But once you get to those, people always think, okay, I'm going to do power cleans now and snatches. It's like, no, those exercises have variations that are safer. Those exercises also are typically used by Olympic athletes that train for 6+ years to compete one time. So it's obviously not a movement you learn in a week and then you start applying it that next day. So I think that understanding that every exercise has a purpose, every movement has a variation that can help as young as pre-puberty to beyond. I think that's the most important part. There's a progression that has to be followed. So
that's awesome. What we need is we need more guys like you, guys and gals, and everyone to help all of our patients. That's what we need desperately, and we need some sort of better coverage for it too. That's an issue. Well, tell everyone, because you do some other things on the side in addition to working at Central Michigan with your high school and stuff. Yeah. So tell people about what some of your other projects you're trying to get to, so we can market for you a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, the biggest thing for me is coaching. I mean, we have a playoff game tonight at 7. Huge. I mean, we were 2-7 last year. This year, we're 6-3. So right now, my focus has been just getting these kids ready physically and mentally.
They suiting you up?
I hope so. But But no, I mean, that's been my biggest thing right now is just helping these kids be ready. I think last year the issue was that we didn't have the confidence or the physical capabilities to like hang with these schools. The other things I'm working on is obviously helping the junior high athletes in the same district be prepared to take that next step next year. I mean, they're going to be in high school. So, I mean, if it starts now, they can definitely get a step ahead. And outside of that, really, I mean, I'm working on a few more certifications and my own personal training business that's online. Primarily, I deal with, anywhere from the mom who just needs to just stay active to I have a power lifter who's trying to do a meet, the next year. So like I'm just doing a bunch right now, trying to help everybody out.
We gotta get you a youth cohort. You get all those kids in there. That's big money right there. So thanks for coming on. It was
of course, anytime.
It's good to promote lifting throughout life, and it sounds like you do a great job at it. So thanks for coming on. Here's our outro.
This podcast is for entertainment and education and information purposes only. Remember, the physicians on this podcast are not your physician. It should not be considered professional or personalized medical advice. It should not be used to replace speaking with your physician or medical professional to discuss your specific health concerns. The topics discussed should not be used solely to diagnose or treat any condition. As a result, we are not responsible for any unwanted medical outcomes. The views and opinions discussed are of those of the host only and do not represent those of any other entities.